Hi, welcome to our interview. I'm Nye and this is...
I'm Ben.
And today we're talking to Jeanie Barton.
If you don't know Jeanie, she is a street artist and also a jazz singer. So Jeanie, we know that you're a member of the Beeston Civic Society. Can you please tell the audience what that is for me, please?
So Beeston Civic Society is a community group that their aims are to protect and improve our environment, our local environment, Beeston and its environs. I didn't know that was a word until it was written down on one of their things. So yeah, it's a really wide scope. So a lot of them kind of keep an eye on planning applications, things like that. It's a lobby group. So if essentially we feed back to the council how the community feels about certain things and what we would like where we are. And we also do things like raising money and doing tree planting and advocating for Swift boxes and bee bricks and things like this, you know, to make the natural environment flourish. And we put on events and things like talks and walks and yeah, so it's like a social group as well.
Why did you pick street art since it's such a big jump from jazz music?
It was a strange one. In fact, Matt Turpin is partly responsible because he started a group on Facebook called Beeston Updated. And because I was living in London for a long time, my husband and I was down there 17 years. He was down there his entire life. So when we moved up with our young son in 2013, 14, I think it was quite a shift. Although I'm from this area, spending so much time near kind of Camden and Shoreditch and places that are quite edgy and arty and so on in North London. I spent more of my lifetime in London than I did around here, even though I'm born and bred in Beeston kind of thing. So when we moved up to Beeston again, it was a bit of a culture shock because it just wasn't the same kind of vibrant, or at least visually not as vibrant as the area that we'd come from. And some people were discussing on this Facebook group that Matt started how ugly the precinct, the 1960s kind of industrial brick building, because they demolished in the 1960s. I mean, this is nationwide and probably wider than that. A lot of period properties. And a lot of the character was ripped out of town centres, city centres and so on. I mean, Broadmarsh just around the corner from here is a prime example of that kind of destruction. So character left the town centres, and then obviously fashion's changed again. Regret has come in. People are like, oh dear, this place just looks so dull. And so we were discussing how we could potentially make, in an affordable way, the back of the precinct especially, because they'd spent some money around the front and in the square, how we could make that back of the precinct better and turn what is an eyesore into an attraction. And several of us in this conversation on this thread said, what about street art? What about murals? Getting artists to come and paint this ugly thing. And it turned into quite the conversation. And from that, somebody said, hey, we should start a separate group called Beeston Street Art to try and make this a reality and just gain some momentum, some information, work out how we could make this a reality. And that's what I did. And the next thing, I started making friends that way. And some of those friends were in the Civic Society, and they also thought it was a great idea. And they had found out there was a fund from Henry Boot plc, who used to own the precinct, of £8,000 that was left after they'd spent £22,000 on it, and it had to be spent on art, and it had to be spent in the vicinity of the precinct. So we thought, hey, that's something to work with. And so it kind of became a more practical project from that point in. But essentially, I guess, myself and the other people who were having that conversation originally in Beeston Updated, we'd all lived in areas where there were street art and murals already. So that's why we had that idea. And so it was less about kind of my jazz background and more about my life in London that connected me with the street art activism.
And in regarding to that, where would you like to see new art?
Where would I like to see it?
Yeah, like where?
Everywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
I like being surprised, you know, when you kind of, in fact, I'm looking forward to having a walk around here because I know they had a do at the weekend where lots of art has been put up. So I like to kind of turn a corner and go, oh, that's new. You know, it just kind of adds to your day, doesn't it? And a bit of like having variety of things to look at. And I think that's kind of the beauty with street art as well, because it by its very nature, it's not a permanent thing. Obviously, the wall surfaces themselves kind of dictate the longevity of what pieces there are, but it's a kind of a transient artwork as well. So there's a lot of artists and they recognise that these things might be around for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, a couple of years, a couple of decades perhaps, but ultimately something else will end up going over it because that's the nature of the art. And so yeah, it's nice to see things change and it's nice to see new walls used as canvases.
Regarding now your jazz career, so between teaching, weddings and like live performances that you've done, out of all of those, what would you say was your favourite to do?
Oh, it's really hard to choose. Live performance is obviously the greatest thrill because the energy exchange that you get with the audience, it's a real tangible thing. I mean, I suppose anyone, whether you're a musician or whether you're an audience member, you've felt that. You know, it's a strange, almost chemical reaction, I guess, that is really Moorish. I guess it's like adrenaline, endorphins, just that shared experience, the shared emotions of doing, you know, different kind of genres of music, and whether something's really hypey and gets everyone dancing or whether something's really emotive and moves the people around you. You can just feel that happening. So whether it's my own compositions, which I do a lot in festivals and clubs and so on around the country, or whether I'm doing functions for, I don't know, corporate events, weddings, anything that we get asked to do at the end of the day, it is the same kind of energy exchange. I guess the difference lies with telling your own story and something that's quite intimate in that respect with your own compositions, or providing a soundtrack that might have been requested by certain people, that they want a certain theme or a song means a lot to them, you know, as a first dance and the requests that we do. But in both cases, it is so rewarding because you can just feel people getting so much from it. And that is true of the musicians because we're emotionally invested in what we're doing. So you can't really separate the two in those terms. It's both hugely pleasurable. And then obviously with teaching, which I've only relatively recently got into after spending 20 years working professionally now. And that was an interesting one because I never really wanted to be a teacher. It's not something that was an ambition of mine. But I started getting asked if I would teach singing or if I would, you know, teach piano because I play piano as well. And I thought, why not? So I started teaching, not as a qualified teacher in inverted commas, but just imparting what I've learnt through my own career. And that's been really rewarding because it's kind of highlighted to me just how much I have learned and how much I have to share. And also to see people of all ages, whether they're learning singing or piano, to see them benefiting from what I can advise them with and help them with, and whatever they want to do that I can assist with, really. That's the direction of the lessons. I don't say, well, you're coming to me to learn this. I say, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to get better at? What do you want to get out of this? And then mould the lessons in that respect. And it's very rewarding to see them gaining from it, and for me to feel that, yeah, I know what I'm talking about here. You know, this is life experience and it feels good to share.
Sweet. And also, before any performance or even teaching gig, how would you prepare yourself before any of those?
Preparation, well, preparation is key, isn't it? So obviously, I mean, later on this afternoon, I've got a student coming, and she loves, she's transcribed by ear, she's only 12, the Nightmare Before Christmas theme, and it's really complex. So, and because I've been working with her obviously on sight reading to a certain extent. These things you have to get under your belt. And my specialism, which is jazz harmony as well, because I've studied jazz harmony in night school and various residential courses and private lessons with Anita Wardell, who's an amazing singer, improviser, musician in London. And so I've been like teaching her how to read and how to write down harmonic shapes on the piano, and so for that piece I'm with her helping transcribe an accompaniment for the melody line that she's transcribed. So yeah, so it's all quite individual to each person. That's just one example. And then when it comes to performances, obviously there's a lot of preparation to make depending on what you're going to be playing in that performance and who it's to, and obviously there's preparation of equipment as well, so we have to buy all the equipment I have. Obviously there's probably well over £1,000 worth of equipment that I take to most gigs, with the PA system, the microphones, the piano itself, obviously lighting sometimes. And then there's your outfits and everything. So, you know, it's not just down to the repertoire. And then obviously there's a preparation of the logistics, how to get there, where you're travelling, how much petrol you need in the car, what time you're going to get there, booking the babysitter. You know, there's all kinds of things that people don't consider that we have to do well in advance of actually turning up and doing the job.
That's a lot. And then between your two albums, Moments of Clarity and Magical Mirror, what was your favourite to like finish and produce and just work on in general?
Oh, wow. So The Magical Mirror was my first album of original compositions. And again, I didn't set out when I started doing music. I've always done music. I came from a background which was doing shows like musical theatre. So I was in Nottingham Operatic Society, the Lace Market Theatre, Beeston Players when I was very young with my parents. That's how they met in that group. And then I got into the National Youth Music Theatre and I toured the country with a couple of shows where I had a principal role in that. So that was like my background. And then after moving to London, I kind of just fell into the jazz scene and realised that I already knew the repertoire because I loved all these old musicals, and a lot of the standards are based on you know, those songs from musicals, the kind of Rodgers and Hammerstein stuff, and you know, Rodgers and Hart and Gershwin and all these wonderful composers, Cole Porter. So I was very knowledgeable of the repertoire before I discovered the skills of performing in a jazz fashion and improvising around sequences and charts and everything else. And then the songwriting kind of came in around about 2003 when my dad got poorly. And I don't know whether it opened some kind of creative valve in my brain, like emotional stress or something. But what I found was songs just started coming to me. So, and my dad would laugh because I used to ring him on the phone most days and he used to ring me. We were very, very close. And he used to like Morecambe and Wise, and Ernie Wise always used to say, oh, here's a play what I wrote. So, you know, I'd say, oh, I've written another song, and it's another song what I wrote. And he's like, oh, you're very prolific, Jeanie, very prolific. But literally, I don't feel like I've written the songs. I know that's a strange thing to say, but I've heard other people say, in another interview I did for the BBC once, the lady said, oh, other musicians talk about this. It's a cosmic download. And I love that phrase. And I think that's how, because I was emotional, I was just open to these downloads. And so that's how the songwriting began. And I wouldn't say there's necessarily been a separation between the two albums. It's more just the downloads keep coming, and then when I've got enough songs for an album, I think, well, you know, there's an album there. So that it's not like they've been all sat down and I'm going to write an album now. That's not the process as I've experienced it. I'm sure other musicians may do that, and sometimes I've been asked to write commissions, certain songs for certain projects, which is very fulfilling, and I can do that. But generally speaking, the songwriting experience for me is just more fluid. Like my late husband used to say, we're transceivers. We give off signals and we receive them. And I think maybe my personality is just such, or my, I think I was watching a video last night about the pineal gland. I think, is that how it's called? Pineal gland. And apparently that in our head is this transmitter. And I think maybe mine's just very active. So there you go.
That's sweet, thank you. And working with a band, because you've been in a band for quite a while now, what was it like? Was it hard to collaborate together? Was it hard to come to an agreement on performances, maybe songs even? How was that for you?
Well, I work with, the jazz scene is fairly unique, I suppose, because we all interchange with each other because of the way that we've learnt to play. So really we're experts in winging it. So although we may rehearse and we may, you know, particularly with songs that they wouldn't know, like my original material, you know, there's certain repertoire where we all know these songs and we can just play them almost off the cuff, or pretty much off the cuff. Then there's original material for which we would have to rehearse because they don't know those songs and I've got to teach it to them and say what, you know, arrangement I'm thinking of doing. But I think because of our the process by which we normally play and normally like have learnt, we bring to the table of each performance our own contribution. So it's not like, as much as I am a band leader in a certain sense, everything is pretty open to artistic interpretation. And that's the excitement of making this kind of music. So for instance, all of those recordings that you'll hear on my albums, The Magical Mirror, Moments of Clarity, and Jazz and Cocktails, which is more covers of songs that people will know, you know, more aimed at the kind of function market, I guess. Essentially, I just go in there with a chord chart and talk about, you know, how I'm hearing it. And then they will say, hey, how about we do it like this? And on several occasions, for instance, there's a song called, can't remember my own music, Carcass, which I recorded quite recently. And I've written it, like you can see on the chord chart, it says an angry samba. That's how it kind of, I was hearing it, because it's got like big energy to it and it's quite an angry song. And then when we ended up in the studio, it turned into this kind of ska style piece, which was because the way I was playing the piano, it just kind of picked up more of a ska groove. And then the guy who was doing the percussion, he was like, hold on a minute. And then the horn player, he was like, hold on, let's do this in like a kind of madness style, where he was layering up the horns, like this kind of thing. So it's all a little bit kind of Chaz and Dave crossed with Victoria Wood, kind of crossed with madness. And it's gone down a storm. But I could never on my own have come up with that genre mix. Do you know what I mean? So being in the studio and being with the guys I work with, we collaborate to create the final product. And a lot of the time it changes drastically from what I'm hearing in my own mind to what we end up doing. I hope that answers your question.
That's perfect, thank you.
And one last one for you, Jeanie. Just wondering how you deal with negative feedback. For example, the Browns Tunnel incident. Oh,
with the street art escapades. Yeah, that's, you know what, that was a real learning curve. So I think because we'd organised the street art in its inception with a group, which obviously people were in there because they loved it, we were in a bit of an echo chamber. And I personally, I suppose because of the type of person I am and the type of person I know, which are mostly creative individuals, quite outgoing and everything, I hadn't expected some of the vehement kind of opposition to us doing these creative things, which were very large scale, and changing the look of Beeston quite drastically with it. Because I was surrounded by people who were loving it and getting into it and just wanted more. So I was a little bit perturbed and upset when there was, I mean, you know what it can be like online. You know, I got messages of people saying, how dare you force this on us and all this. And like, oh God, that wasn't my intention. I thought everyone was like into it. Anyway, you live and learn. It's just one of those situations you can please some of the people some of the time, but not all of the people all of the time. And that's true in life. But I was concerned in case I'd got it completely wrong and I was in the minority with this group of people. So what we did was we set up online polls with basically the question, when it comes to Beeston street art, yes, I like it and I'd love to see more. No, I don't like it. I don't want any more. Basically, those were the options. And we put that on Beeston Updated, which is the biggest group on the Facebook. We also put it on the Civic Society page. We also had the same poll in the Square a few times, and we got thousands and thousands of responses. And of those responses, 89% of people said they loved the street art and they'd like to see more, and 11% said that they hate it and they don't want it. So from that, we came to the conclusion that yes, there are people who hate it, but they're quite a small minority. They're just very loud. And at that point, I just thought, and then my husband actually pointed out something to me. He said, you've made a lot of people really happy with what you've done here. You've obviously increased footfall. The estate agents are pleased. There's evidence to suggest that economically having art in high streets and so on is highly beneficial to the economy of the area and for business and for house prices and all the rest of it, which is kind of a two-sided coin in itself. But anyway, generally speaking, people consider that to be a positive thing. He said, these people who are complaining about it, he said, have you ever considered that they actually enjoy complaining? So you've just given them something to complain about because that's the type of people they are. Now, that doesn't compute with me because I'm just all about positivity. But I think particularly going through stuff like Brexit and so on, you can kind of see the type of person who just loves to moan. So now I think when someone goes off on one, it used to really get to me and I'd get quite emotional and upset about it, especially when it felt very personal. I used to think, oh no, oh God, I hate people. You can only think of the bad feedback. You can't think of the good feedback. But now I kind of look at them and I think, oh, I've made you happy. Look at you, got something to moan about. So he's happy as well, kind of thing. And yeah, with the Browns Tunnels thing, I mean, that was just ridiculous. Basically, this chappie joined a load of street art groups, and the main one was The Art of Knots with a Z on it on Facebook. Now, that group, again, it's going to be an echo chamber because the people who joined that group love graffiti and are, a majority of them in there, graffiti artists. So this person who hates graffiti joins a group that loves graffiti and then continues to harass and, abuse people in that group. He was ringing me up incessantly. I actually had a restraining order from the police. I had to contact the police because it was just withheld numbers and so on, just all the time. So, yeah, to be honest, this person, not very well, I don't think. But unfortunately, that provocation that, of annoying everyone in the scene who are just, lovely people like postmen and, just regular kind of office working people who happen on the weekend to go out and to paint. And this huge legal area, which was celebrated and, it's still an iconic area that is, legal or not, always going to be painted. It's just that's how it is. The national highways were totally in favour of the whole thing, but within the contract that we'd signed to legalise it, one of the points was that there should not be any harassment or, if there's any kind of law breaking, harassment being one of those kind of things involved, then that will null and void the arrangement, the agreement. And unfortunately, this particular individual, who I won't name for obvious circumstances, one of the graffiti artists decided to paint his name near his house. And of course that was seen as harassment and it broke our contract. And it was really sad. But then this particular person, after he'd kicked up a fuss and managed to get the contract, he said, oh no, that's not what I wanted. I didn't want that to happen. I said, well, it's done now, isn't it? You know, and he said, oh no, I'll get it back for you. I'll get you the contract. But I was, you know, just strange, odd behaviour. But the artist actually put sorry above his name. So it turned into this really amusing kind of tit for tat. Sorry. And I was thinking about getting mugs made with that on because it was just really witty, actually. So the whole thing just turned quite farcical. But we all just see it as a shame. But actually, between you and me, because and everyone who's watching, because National Highways are still really keen to approach that contract. It was them who wanted to expand it because it was going so well. You know, it wasn't us kind of forcing graffiti on the area or anything. It was just people going, hey, we should make this a legal space and this a legal space. You know, it's community. It makes it a vibrant area with people just hanging out and you know, photographers come down there. We had Getty Images come and visit. You know, it was just brilliant. And there's a pump track down there as well where people do cycling. People were turning up with, you know, little barbecues and things. It just turned into a really nice do. And they would like for that to happen again. So actually we are now in talks to hopefully resurrect that legal contract. Yeah.
Thank you for your time today, Jenny. That was brilliant. And
You're welcome.
yeah, thank you.
Bye.